Okay, recording is now in progress. And we're all
Okay,
wearing black. Who knew?
okay, so we are all together tonight. Alyssa, Annacelli, Richard, and Jenny. And tonight we're going to be talking about spirituality and religion. We are going to go through the assignment, and we're going to do it in a round robin way, so everybody has a chance to participate and share their thoughts on each component. We have also decided to use Beth as our case study in discussion for this assignment. So let's begin. And the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is our own experiences and perspectives on spirituality and religion. So I'll start, and I'll pass that to Annacelli to start, and then we'll move to Richard and Jenny. I'm going across the boxes of Zoom. So Annacelli.
Okay, um, so I guess the question was, what do we have more of a positive reaction towards? And I feel like for me, it's both. I believe, not believe, but I'm connected both with spirituality and religion, and I find a lot of core concepts very similar in both aspects, where, overall goodness of a person, having good character values, good not passing judgment, not discriminating, that kind of stuff. And I can see it in both spirituality lenses and religious lenses. I just think when somebody's religious, they do it because they believe in their God, and that's what their higher power would deem a pleasing sort of aspect. And then more spirituality would be just that's what that person believes. So I can go with both, and I have both. I have positive views towards both spirituality and religion.
Okay.
Yeah. And Sally, similar to you, when I started my own spiritual development as a younger kid, we went to church, I went to Sunday school, and I believed in that sort of the softer side of God too. As a child, I thought Jesus was like the OG social justice warrior. It was all about love and empathy. And then when I became a teenager, the messages changed for me, and a lot of it was how I was going to hell because I was a gay person. And I found that dichotomy removed me instantly from the whole concept of religion. I struggled a little bit, but then I just extracted myself from it. That being said, I still do believe there's a spiritual dimension in my life. It's just not tied to a particular God or a particular dogma. But I'm not going to say that I know the answers to all of life's mysteries. There are still things. Maybe they could be explained by physics in another couple hundred years when people have more knowledge. But you know, um, there's this one thing in the text about Asagilo. I can't pronounce his name, but he was talking about psychosynthesis. Higher consciousness that informs creativity and spirituality. And I do believe in those sort of ways of tapping into. Maybe it's powers we have in our brain, and we're just tapping into them even more. I lead an art therapy group, and that sort of has a spiritual effect on a lot of the people. People open up more so during creative pursuits than they do even in our therapeutic groups. So I feel comfortable talking about spirituality. Where I get uncomfortable is when it uh, starts talking about like organized religion, and that's a bias I have even against my own clients when they talk about how strongly they believe in Jesus or how strongly their Christian or Muslim faith is. I just get like very verklempt about it. And so this chapter actually has, and this Beth story that we'll talk about later has sort of opened me to the idea too that, listen, I mean, this is the reality of people's lives and what they believe in. And I need to open myself up to a little bit more of their worldview so I can understand how they operate. That's all I got.
Well said.
Okay,
Jenny?
now my turn. Okay, I was just making sure. I was like, okay. When it comes to like the religion aspect and like the spirituality aspect, I'm more like on like the religious side. I kind of had like the opposite of what Richard had growing up. I like completely did not like my religion. I was like, I grew up with the thought like I have to go to religion class, I have to go to church, I have to pay my respects to Jesus and all the gods. And growing up, I was just like, I thought it was just a phase that everybody went through, like going to Catholic school, all that communion, confirmation, all that. And then when I got to high school, I kind of, I wasn't like blind growing up. I knew there were other religions and stuff, but I didn't really understand what people exactly like praised or prayed about. And then like when I was in high school, I just completely like ditched the religion. I was kind of like, yeah, like I'm Catholic, to the side. And then it wasn't until I got into like into college where I like really realized like how much devotion do I really want to be in church and stuff. And so I kind of had like a really late like awakening about my own religion. And then I never judged anybody on what religion they were on, what they like, if they were more on the spiritual side, like they kind of just admired their religion like I did growing up. Like they kind of were just like, oh, it's there. And I know that's me. I'm part of that religion, but I don't really do much in it. And then growing up now, I'm like, oh, I want to be more devoted to it because it was something that the religion spoke to me a little bit. I liked the rules. I liked going here, going this, thinking about that, um like anything really. So I'm used to be more on the spiritual side growing up because I basically rejected as a kid. Nobody really told me, oh, like we're Catholic because of this. They were kind of like, we are Catholic, do this. So now that I'm on the other side, on my own personal perspective about the religion, I'm like, I had my own little awakening on my own, and I'm like, I don't think I wouldn't want to judge anybody else on their religion, and I kind of found out why. I kind of got the idea that we all are part of one religion. We just respect it in different ways. So like there are multiple cultures that have a god or don't or whatever, but they respect it and they praise it in a different way. But we're all praising something in the end. So that was my perspective on it. So I was like, if that makes sense.
So Jenny has reached stage 4.
Right.
All those
Yeah.
stages. Congratulations. That's good. Alyssa, how about your experience?
So my experience is kind of interesting. I come from I will say a Jewish family that the Jewish traditions were certainly a big part of my growing up, and they meant a lot because it was really family. And in my house, holidays also meant that there was going to be um, lots of political conversations about what was happening in the world, because
Mhm.
a big part of the Jewish religion is teaching, and there was always that aspect to it. But also, I grew up in a neighborhood that was not particularly Jewish, and most of my friends were not Jewish. So it wasn't, I was like the only kid who went to Hebrew school. So with that in mind, I had a lot of ambivalence about it. But what I've come to take away from my experience is the parts that have made me be very culturally aware and very, I want to say, very left leaning in understanding the world. So I do take that part away. And my daughter, who is half Jewish and half Italian, really has embraced her progressive Judaism and has used it for not just service, but really like political change. So I appreciate all that. I find myself maybe a little like Richard was describing. I'm open and I have complete respect for people who believe in anything that makes them feel comforted, gives them a sense of belonging. What I sometimes find myself really struggling with is any kind of proselytization, anything and anytime that somebody feels they have to tell me about their beliefs and why I should believe that. So anything that for me that sparks on like any kind of I want to say intensive evangelical or very orthodox kind of sect, I really struggle with it. And I think that's something that I'm also coming to terms with in my own level and way of dealing, in that people are entitled. I believe people are entitled to believe and function in every manner they would like. I don't want people to tell me that that is the way to do it. And unfortunately, I can't separate that from what's happened to our political agenda. So knowing that we live in a country that is basically run by the evangelical conservative Christian right, and that's just a fact, and it has been for a very, very, very long time. It makes me really question my capacity on dealing. On the same token, I have friends who, are reborn and evangelical, and we have conversations, and I certainly enjoy that. I'm grappling. Spiritually, I'm a yoga instructor. I'm involved in the whole world, and I even see myself having some very significant Buddhist kind of philosophy. So,
I mean, this is a great segue because, the next question is, given that as social workers, we need to be, culturally competent, and we deal with people with a lot of religious and spiritual backgrounds during our assessments. What questions are we comfortable asking, or are we not comfortable asking? And I'm glad that we have multiple perspectives in this panel that really helps us to sort of get a fuller picture. Like, Anna-Sally, is there anything that you feel comfortable asking clients during assessments, or maybe not?
So I think just with life and everything that I've gone through, um, I'm comfortable talking to anybody about anything kind of situation. I'm not on it, nothing makes me uncomfortable. If you're very religious, that's up to you. If you're not religious at all, if you're more interested in something that's, you know, it's hard because like when I see like things on the news of like somebody who does something terrible, I'm also on the side of like looking at it like, okay, well, what did this person go through and like what traumatic experience did they have? Like, I kind of give a lot of benefit of the doubt sometimes. But in a way, I feel like it's a good thing because I'm not like, just give it to me. Just tell me what you got going on and what can we do to make it better. Nothing's off the table for me. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not here to judge. Like, literally, that's just my aspect. Whatever it is that you do, that's you. Whatever you believe in, whatever you think is going to be your final judgment, that's you. You have to deal with that. I'm not there to judge you. So if you are comfortable talking about it, or you want to express it, or if I can ask some questions that are gonna get you to talk to me about it, I'm really not afraid of anything in particular yet. Obviously, I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Um, but for and like in at least these terms, there's nothing here that would turn me off in any sort of way.
I mean, for me, I've had to learn how to become more comfortable discussing spirituality with people, only because now through working and through this kind of work we're doing at school, I'm realizing how important that is for a lot of my clients. In my case, I thought it was weird that you had mentioned like the types of people we have to deal with as social workers. And, I work with a lot of people who have committed crimes, for instance, pretty heinous crimes. But that's not what we're talking about. We're here to discuss what their needs are in this moment. They paid the price, they've gone to prison.
Right.
Yet I was having trouble as soon as somebody would mention something about, oh, I go to church, I'd be like, oh, that's nice, and then move on. Therefore, missing a huge chunk of what makes this person who they are now. So I guess I didn't used to be comfortable about talking about it, but now I kind of realize it's part of what the bigger picture is, and I'm feeling much more confident in discussing spiritual matters, not just with clients, but even just thinking about it myself.
Right, right. Yeah. It kind
What
of
about you,
opens up.
Jenny? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Nope, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Um, the same thing like Anna-Sally. I'm very open. If I'm an open book, I don't expect everybody to be as open as I am, but I'm okay with talking about any topic. Probably like the only thing, like you were saying, like you kind of glazed over the fact like, oh, I go to church, like, oh, okay, like next. That's probably I that's probably the only thing I'm uncomfortable with, is I'm uncomfortable with when knowing when to dive into a certain situation, because sometimes they don't want to talk about like their religion or their family life. I don't care what drama is going on in my family. I don't care what I heard in church. If you want to talk about church and my family drama, I'm here. Like, I'm here for a cup of tea, cup of coffee, you know? Uh, I guess it's like I just don't want to offend them. You know, as social workers, future social workers, we have to be able to know when to step into certain boundaries, when not to, and that's kind of hard because some people put a really good poker face. So like they could be like, "Oh, I go to church." I'm like, "Oh, okay, like what church do you go to? Like are you like do you really like going to church, or how are you feeling about that?" Sometimes they're like, "Why would you ask me that? Like I don't know anything about my religion." Like sometimes that's true. Like when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about my religion. I still don't. It's a learning process here. You know, they were like, "Oh, what do you know about your church?" I don't really know. Like then I'm gonna offend the person for not knowing enough about their own religion. Like I'm judging them, and I that's not what I want. So that's probably just the only thing uncomfortable is when to ask these more like personal, intimate questions, pushing the barrier a little bit to knowing the client, because it's nice to have that personal relationship, but obviously with boundaries, what they're comfortable with, it's kind of hard to know what they're comfortable with when you're just starting to get to know them.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said, Jenny, made me really think of the whole concept of spiritual bypassing. And I think that for me, that's very relevant here, because one of the things that I feel like I do grapple with, and it really, I want to articulate it this way, is that oftentimes, and Richard, you probably may have experienced this in your work, is that when there are levels of addiction, I often find that sometimes addiction just changes. So as a person moves through their drug addiction, drinking, gambling, what have you, there is a level of focus on religion, which certainly has its place in moving people through that spectrum. And I do believe it creates a structure and a place of safety that I think is necessary. I absolutely do. I think there's that wonderful bridge. But for me, what makes me sometimes uncomfortable and thinking like a psychologist, I say to myself, am I dealing with somebody who's really, let's say, very involved in their religion and not really getting underneath to, whether there's a level of avoidance or repression, and not really digging deep enough into what's really happening on a more psychodynamic level. That being said, however, I do also think, and having gone through quite a few experiences of death and illness and watching different people, I will say that the people I know who've had a great deal of sense of belonging in religion and spirituality seem to have more of an ease in accepting death and accepting the incredibly difficult traumas that they experience. And as a 65-year-old person, I, unfortunately have seen quite a few things that have happened to people along the way. So there is a softness and almost like a place of landing in the worst of times that I truly think is a beautiful thing. So I'm giving you like both ends of my spectrum in how I really feel what makes me comfortable. But I will say, kind of like diving into a person's spirituality, not necessarily religion, but I would get a sense of where they find a sense of comfort and support.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm going to say, and it's a lesson I learned a long time ago, when I was an assistant principal in a District 75 program for a lot of emotionally challenged folks, and most of the folks for people of color. I remember oftentimes meeting with parents, and the first go-to I would say is, well, I really think you guys would benefit from family therapy, yada, yada. And I started to realize I was getting a lot of pushback, and I thought in my white elitist way, gee, what am I doing wrong? Well, duh, I'm dealing with a population of people that really feel spiritually and emotionally connected to their church. Aha, moment. And that made me turn everything around. And when I met with people, I would say, wherever you find guidance, support, and strength, that's where you need to go.
Mm.
And my relationships with the people and families I were working with, it immediately changed. So there was such an impact.
And just in the interest of time, it looks like we have a little over 5 minutes before Zoom kicks us out.
Yes.
But Alyssa, you provided that perfect segue into Beth. Just before I move on to Anaceli really quickly, is Beth exhibits that idea of having a spirituality that isn't necessarily based in religion. One of the readings we did was on adolescent exemplars, and they had stated specifically that those who participate in religious communities have greater sense of purpose and commitment to personal philosophy. But I argue that Beth and people who've grown up like her also have that same commitment to personal philosophies if they grow up in a household that promotes it in another way if it's not religion. So that's why I argue that Beth did move through these stages, Fowler stages of spiritual development, much like anybody else who's tied to religion might be, specifically because she had that community or that parenting that still instilled certain values that we would call moral values. And what were your thoughts on it, Anaceli?
I agree. So I actually looked at Wilbur's
Mhm.
theory. And what I did take away from Beth was it wasn't one of the points in Wilbur's theory is that it's not linear. There's not a perfect line as to how things are going to go. And I think this is exactly her case. Beth, kind of found a wiggle road to get to the point that she got to. So I think it speaks to this theory that, things are not linear. Don't expect it to be exactly how you have planned, or, you might just now later in life, everything she avoided and she thought was, I can't even go there. I would avoid people from religious backgrounds. She's like, oh, well, maybe we're not so different after all. They're religious and I might be a spiritual person, or I have certain cores, but we share similarities. So I did find correlation between Wilbur's theory of, things not being linear.
Which is
And
great.
Beth.
I think Fowler's feels much more linear and much more based on developmental stages. So yeah.
And it is. And if we look at Fowler, like stage 4, where Beth really starts to reconsider her own sense of where she can think about religion. And that was really based on her experience with a coworker who found a great deal of sense of self and the social justice through her Catholicism. So it made Beth really, question, hey, maybe there is another way I can do this work for societal change. And that was really that's what stage 4 is all about in Fowler. Jenny, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, it was just I found it really interesting how like most of these case studies. Give me a second.
That was my roommate earlier. He was letting my cat into my room. I was like, I'm on a call.
My cat just climbed over the computer.
Where is she? Oh, there she
Sorry,
is.
I got 3 pets, and my uncle just came home. It's a whole fiasco. Anyways, I found it really interesting how like all the case studies for the Fowlers, because I looked more at Fowlers than Wilbur's. That the pre-stage, the primal one, like infancy or whatever, none of them really talked about that one stage. Everybody just kind of like glazed over it. They went to stage 1. And also like she had a different like type of upbringing. Her parents were just like they were like, we'll just let you do whatever you want, you are free to figure out whatever. And it kind of like got me thinking like, oh, like if her parents if she was born into like a super strict Catholic society, she would have been a super strict Catholic. She was born into like a Muslim society, she would have been Muslim. If she lived here, she would have been this, here, that. But her parents wanted her to have that religious freedom, that spirituality perspective to make the decision on her own. They taught her morals, but they were like, before you judge anybody, judge how you would want to be seen, how you would want to be judged, basically. Walk a mile in their shoes. I think that's what a quote that she was using a lot.
Yeah, which
And
ties up to
also,
the, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I read that the stages 1 through 5 for Fowler's is literally the same stages as the first 5 stages of Wilbur. So basically, they interconnected, and I thought that basically kind of the same theories.
Right. I think Wilbur's goes into more deep detail. I mean, they're both, fourth force theories. And basically they're really focusing on the level of spiritualism and separating the idea of religion as a structure and pattern versus spirituality and how we get there. And
Just to let y'all know we have 1 minute left, so we'll do some closing remarks.
yes. So I was heading into wrapping it up in terms of talking about just the differences between religion and spirituality. And as social workers, we have to deal with people and want to deal with people, whether they are religious, spiritual, or not.
Agreed.
Well, thank you all. We're about to get kicked off in 30 seconds because I didn't upgrade to pro.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
It was great talking.
It was great. Richard, are you going to send us the recording?
I will, yeah.
All
Thank you
right.
guys so much.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
Bye.